Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah, alaykum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Salatu wa salam ala Sayyid al-Anbiya wal Mursaleen, Allahumma alimna ma yanfa'una wa anfa'na bima tu'allimuna wa zidna bi fadlika ilman wa ta'aliman innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. Okay, so we started this last week and we mentioned um, he says جاء زيد نفسه أو عينه فترفع بذكر النفس أو العين احتمال الكون الجائي رسول زيد أو خبره أو نحو ذلك. Right? So what's the point of using التوكيد المعنوي when you say Zayd came himself? Is to say, I don't mean Zayd's friend or Zayd's messenger or Zayd's whatever. It means Zayd actually himself, right? You're removing that possibility, right? ولفظ النفس والعين في توكيد مؤنث كلفظهما في التوكيد المذكر تقول جاءت هند نفسها أو عينها. وفي المثنى والجمع تجمع النفس والعين على أفعل تقول في جاء الزيدان أنفسهما not نفوسهما أو أعينهما right وجاء الزيدون أنفسهم أو أعينهم وجاءت الهندات أنفسهن أو أعينهن ويجيء في الغرض الثاني في التوكيد المثنى المذكر بكلا والمؤنث بكلتا. So he said, what's the second goal of it? So one thing is to remove ambiguity. The other one is to remove the possibility if it's just. Here he says, 1 second, please. Right? So he says the possibility أو إرادة الخصوص بما ظاهره العموم. Right? You might mean specifically one of the two when the outward purport of it, the zahir of it, was that it meant both. So I'm saying, no, I do actually mean both. Right? So when you say something like both of them or all of them, right? So يجيء في الغرض الثاني في توكيد مثنى, i.e. to remove the possibility of not meaning everybody mentioned in the class that I mentioned. المثنى مذكر بكلا والمؤنث بكلتا مضافين إلى ضمير المؤكد نحو جاء الزيدان كلاهما والمرأتان كلتاهما وبكل مضافا إلى ضمير مؤكد تقول جاء الجيش كله والقبيلة كلها والقوم كلهم والنساء كلهن فترفع بذكر كل وكلا وكلتا احتمال كون الجاء بعض المذكورين. Right? It was possible that you just meant some of them. The people meaning some of them, but I mean all of them. إما لأنك لم تعتد بالمتخلف. Oh, I didn't care about that person. أو لأنك جعلت الفعل الواقع من البعض كالواقع من الكل. Right? Sometimes you see like, oh, they did it, meaning most of them did it. Right? I mean, bab, it's type of majaz. من بناء على أنهم في حكم شخص واحد. ويخلف, right, comes after them. Right. And we just remind ourselves that with kila and kilta, when are they mabni and when are they not mabni? Who can remember? So kul is mu'rab, but kila and kilta, when is it mabni and when is it not mabni? Okay, it is mabni when it's not mudaf to a damir. Right? So when you say something like رأيت كلا الرجلين ومررت بكلا الرجلين. Okay? But if it's you say مررت بكليهما ورأيت كليهما. Okay? So رأيت كلتا الامرأتين. Right? So it's going to be when it's mudaf to not when it's not mudaf to a dhamir, it's going to be mabni. When it's mudaf to a uh, when it's mudaf to when it's mudaf to a what's it called, to a dhamir, it becomes ma'rab. Okay. Now technically speaking, they don't really call it mabni though. I think there's a debate whether you actually call it strictly mabni, but it has a different i'rab, but effectively it's mabni. Okay. Khair. So now we're going to add something at the end of it. Okay. So now we've done our tawkid. You specified themselves as opposed to somebody else, or all of them as opposed to some of them. Now you're going to follow it up with something else. He says, وَيَخْلُفُ comes after it. كُلًّا, all of those words we just mentioned, the word أجمع or جمع وأجمعون وجمع. تقول جاء الجيش أجمع والقبيلة جمعاء, feminine of أجمع, like أحمر حمراء, right? والقوم أجمعون. Okay, أجمعين is a hal. Okay, جاء القوم أجمعين, that's حال. جاء القوم أجمعون, that's توكيد. Okay, والنساء أجمعوا. قال الله تعالى لأغوينهم أجمعين. Right, وإن شئت جمعت بين كل وأجمع بشرط تقدم كل على أجمع فتقول جاء الجيش كله أجمع. وكذا الباقي قال تعالى فسجد الملائكة كلهم أجمعون. Okay, so if you said فسجد الملائكة أجمعين, that's a hal, it's different, right? So you cannot use أجمع by itself. So you can use أجمع by itself, but it's going to come after كل. Okay, so after your pronoun, right? And there's other words as well that we can use. We're not going to talk about it here. Okay, that makes sense?
Yes, Sheikh.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Now we're going on to atf, right? And atf is in reality two things, okay? Or kind of three things. So atf is another type of na'at. Atf is also when you say and or then. And you can do atf of a mufrad to a mufrad, like ja'a zaydun wa amrun, or a verb to a verb. In tajlis, thumma ta'kul. So ta'kul is ma'tuf to tajlis, and tajlis is majzoom because of the in, right? So you could do atf of a mufrad to a mufrad or a sentence to a sentence, right? Like man yeah من دخل بيتي فهو صديقي فهو صديقي وأنا صديقه. Okay, so in a conditional sentence like that, when you have a fa, the word after fa, the sentence after fa will be fi mahal jazm. So there's a sentence that's fi mahal jazm, and then I copied the jazm to the next sentence, right? So the jazm you could copy mahal to mahal, right? That can happen as well. Okay, so you got atfa of a ja zaydun wa amrun, raitu zaydan wa amran, that's easy. And then you've got in tajlis wa ta'kul fa, or whatever it is. So that was out of a verb to a verb. Right? That can happen as well. And you can happen a normal out of a sentence to a sentence. Right? Okay, so he says فالعطف هو عطف بيان وعطف نسق. Right, عطف بيان is a type of صفة. عطف نسق is what we're just talking about. فعطف البيان هو التابع, it follows. الجامد. Okay, this is how it's different to the na'at. The na'at is mushtaq أو مؤول بالمشتق. Okay, الذي جيء به لإيضاح متبوعه. So it is not primary, it is secondary. كأقسم بالله أبو حفص عمر. So Abu Hafsin is a tawti'ah, is a warm-up to the word Omar. Okay? Sorry. Yeah. If that's the case, if if Abu Hafsin Umaru and Umar is the maqsood, then Umar is a badal and not an atf bayan. But if you're saying Abu Hafs swears by Allah in brackets, oh, that's Umar, by the way. So Abu Hafs is the maqsood, and the Umar is just for idah, is just to add clarity. Okay? And Umar is not mushtaq. It is not mushtaq. Nor is it mu'awwal bin mushtaq. It is just this person, right? It's just this person. That's not mushtaq. Nor is it interpreted as mushtaq. In which case, right? As opposed to, for example, Sibawayh. Sibawayh could be a name of a person. It could also be like somebody really good at grammar, right? A Nahwi, right? The grammarian, right? Einstein, meaning the intelligent person. That's something else. That could be like an alam, could be mu'awwal bil mushtaq, right? MashaAllah, anta hatimun fil karam. Anta kareem, right? Hatim, meaning you are like that person who is generous, right? That's something else. But Umar is not mushtaq wala mu'awwal bil mushtaq, okay? And assuming that you're just using it to clarify Abu Hafs, in which case it is just atf bayan. But if Umar is the maqsood, then it is badal, right? And it's a totally different thing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, great. So then what's stopping Umar from being a nat? It is not mushtaq, nor is it mu'awwal bil mushtaq, right? And I think the best example to kind of understand these things, I mentioned it last lesson the week before, was when you say قرأت هذا في المجموع شرح المحذب. So there's this book, Al-Majmu' by Imam al-Nawawi, right? And it is a commentary on the Muhadhab of Shirazi. So I say قرأت هذا في المجموع شرح المهذب. So the book is known as Al-Majmu'. Sharh al-Muhadhab is just kind of like an extra. You could just say Al-Majmu', or you could say Al-Majmu' Sharh al-Muhadhab. You may sometimes refer to it as Sharh al-Muhadhab as well. But normally Al-Majmu'. So the word Sharh al-Muhadhab is just there for idah, just extra. But Sharh al-Muhadhab is not mushtaq, nor is it mu'awwal bil mushtaq. It's kind of like its fuller name, right? So that fuller name or more detail, that's a classic example of atf bayan, and that's not a sifa. Okay. أو تخصيصه نحو من ماء صديد plus water, right? And so in English we actually use this a lot. A tablecloth, right? A watchmaker, right? We actually use that a lot, right? Where we use a noun to describe another noun, right? So we're qualifying one noun with another noun. We're not qualifying it with a chance to do that. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Right? It's not you're so like a fly net, right? A fly net. So a fly is not an adjective, right? A a a a, a bread bin, right? That's not a bread is not an adjective, right? So here it's pus water, right? نحو من ماء صديد, pus water, right? So that's atf bayan, okay? Because it's not mushtaq, nor is it mu'awwal bil mushtaq, as opposed to al-baytu hadha, right? Hadha mu'awwal bil mushtaq, right? الرجل العراقي, Iraqi is mu'awwal bil mushtaq because it means al-mansub ila Iraq, right? Okay, وعطف النسق, okay? And we mentioned again with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim that we can make Ar-Rahman Rahim, we can analyze it in three different ways. So if you say Ar-Rahman Rahim is a sifa, that would mean in the name of the merciful and kind Allah, right? If you make it a badal, that means in the name of Allah, comma, the merciful, comma, the kind, right? But if you make it atf bayan, that's like saying in the name of Allah, and in brackets, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. It's like that's just there kind of as extra information. Okay? So the best way, so then when they say badal or atf bayan, it's not the same meaning. That's just potentially you could analyze it in both ways. But it's not actually the same thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And then he says وعطف النسق وهو التابع المتوسط بينه وبين متبوعه أحد حروف العطف. Right? So the fa'il of mutawassit is the word ahad. One of the huruf al-atf comes between it and its thing that's following. Right? والحروف العطف على الأصح تسعة الواو لمطلق الجمع. Right? And so this is a discussion that's going to come up in usul al-fiqh in ma'ani al-huruf, but this is a discussion that is proper to nahu. And just put a footnote. Look, when you have discussions of, so in usul al-fiqh we talk about the huruf, right? But in reality, it's something that's proper to nahu. So just look, just put a footnote and say, see al-Mughni al-Labib. So Mughni al-Labib, that is really the kind of the best place where these huruf are explained, because Mughni al-Labib is organized kind of like in Nahu is organized more like an alphabetical order, right? So I'm looking under ba, like what does ba mean? Okay. So I'm going to look there, and then I'm going to look at the hawashi of the Mughni, like ad-Damamini, like al-Amir, and there may be others. Similarly, you're going to find other books in the East, like Mulla Jami, like Sharh Radi on the Kafiya, right? You're going to have a lot of details there as well, right? So that's the place where the Talib Ilm, when we're discussing the Ma'ani al-Huruf, that's where we're going to go. We're not going to stick to our matan in Usul al-Fiqh, because that's not the place where you discuss these things. Just like Majaz, right? You look at Majaz, discussions of Majaz in Usul al-Fiqh. Fine, we talk about Majaz in Usul al-Fiqh, but the proper discussion is going to be in places of Majaz, okay? In Balagha. Similarly, hadith discussions. Yeah, okay, we'll talk about hadith discussions. Is the Mursal hadith a proof or not? But we go to a hadith book. Similarly, the qira'at and those kind of things go to ulum al-Quran, etc. Okay. So just if I die today, at least you can, inshallah, have the ajr, ya Allah, of you reading, get Hashit ad-Damamini, right? Ad-Damamini on the Mughni Labib, and Hashit Amir is short on the Mughni Labib, and also we mentioned Radi ad-Din al-Astrabadi on the Kafiya of Ibn Hajib. And I'm sure that the Turks and Kurds and Indo-Pak scholars, they have other Hawashi and things, right, on these things. And it's actually quite useful, right? It is actually important. Okay, it comes up in fiqh a lot. Okay, والواو لمطلق الجمع نحو جاء زيد نحو what? إذا قمتم إلى صلاتي, right? So here مطلق الجمع. So if إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم إلى المرافق وامسحوا برؤوسكم وأرجلكم إلى الكعبين. If it's مطلق الجمع, then there is no tartib and there is no ولاء. It doesn't have to. There's no muwala, right? You do not have to do it in order, nor do you have to do it immediately after each other. So you could have 5 hours between you wash your face and wash your arms. Doesn't matter, and we can wash your arms first and then your face, right? And that is the default, because it says wa. Right? That's the asl. So anybody who claims otherwise has to bring the dalil, right? If you claim that tartib is a shart, you have to bring the dalil. If you say that that there has to be wila, has to be immediate, relative, immediate mutaba'a or mutaba'a, or like the one thing follow the other, muwala between the a'da of wudu, you have to prove it. That's khilaf al-asl. That makes sense. The asl is not, because it just says atf, wow, right? Similar, إنما الصدقات للفقراء, right? لمطلق الجمع. So the Shafis, we say you have to give at least zakat to at least 28 people. 24 people, sorry. Why? Because wa mentions 8 categories, and it says atf. And atf is for jama'. So that means you have to give to all of the 8 categories. Can't just give it to one. It doesn't say إنما الصدقات للفقراء أو المساكين. It says what? Right? And then each of them are plural. نقل جمع ثلاث. Right? The minimum plural is 3. Right? So that's the default. That's where we're starting from. Right? That's what the Shafi say. That's where they're starting from. Obviously, there's other opinions, of course, but that's where we're starting from. Right? That's our starting point. لمطلق الجمع نحو جاء زيد وعمر. Right? قبله أو معه أو بعده, doesn't matter. والفاء للترتيب والتعقيب. Right? And it often, because ta'qib and causation, ta'lil, often go together, it's often like that. جاء زيد فعمر. Right? That gives the sense that Amr came because of Zayd coming. Right? ضربته فمات. That means I struck him and then he died because of my striking him. Right? That's the default, right? And ta'lil, right? And fa is very important. والفاء للترتيب والتعقيب. بحسب الحال, right? نحو جاء زيد فعمر وتزوج زيد فولد له, right? So that's تعقيب, immediacy, بحسب الحال, depending on the situation. وثم للترتيب والتراخي الزمني والرتبي. الزمني جاء زيد ثم بعده بساعة بنصف ساعة بيوم بسنة عمرو. Okay, so one came and there was a gap, right? And there's tarahi rutbi as well, right? خلقتك ثم أشركت غيري بي, right? I created you and then you ascribe partners for me. Like, oh my God, how could you have done that? Thumma. So it doesn't, so thumma frequently comes in the Quran. It means, and on top of that, and more importantly, right? It doesn't mean and then, okay? Thumma. So frequently, if you look at thumma, you're going to say, this thumma means on top of that, or more importantly. It doesn't actually mean and then, right? So it's tarahi rutbi, and then on another level, this happened, as opposed to then on another time, this happened, right? وحتى للتدريج والغاية بحسب القوة والضعف أو بحسب الشرف والخسة. مثال الأول مات الناس حتى الأنبياء, سبحان الله. ومثال الثاني استغنى الناس حتى الحجامون, right? right. وأم لطلب التعيين, right? أتريد الشاي أو القهوة؟ نعم يا سيدي. أتريد الشاي أو القهوة؟ نعم يا هذا. ماذا أقول؟ قل أتريد الشاي أم القهوة, right? So أتريد الشاي أو القهوة. Are you in the category of people who either want tea or coffee? Yes, I am. Do you want tea or coffee? Yes. Okay, do you want tea or do you want coffee? Yes. Habibi, do you want tea or do you want coffee? Yes, I do want tea or coffee. I am not in the category of people who neither want tea nor coffee, right? So in Arabic, you have O and you have am. So am is for talab al-ta'yin. Which one? Right? Which of the two would you like? In which case, it would be an invalid response to say yes, right? So if I say aturid al-shaya am al-qahwa, right? You now have to say which of the two of them, okay? نحو أعندك زيد أم عمرو, right? وإذا كنت عالم بأن أحدهما عنده لكن شككت في عينه أو بعد همزة التسوية نحو سواء علي أقام زيد أم عمرو, right? أو شككت في عينه, right? Now you don't, which one? After همزة التسوية, this or this, سواء علي, whether, it means that the hamza is whether. أقام زيد أم عمرو, whether Zayd stands or Amr, right? وأول أحد الشيئين نحو لبثنا يوما أو بعض يوم, right? أول الأشياء نحو فكفارته إطعام 10 مساكين, one of the two things. ولكن للاستدراك, right, is to catch up on something that is missed out. نحو مررت بصالح لكن طالح, right? Right, so لكن, we can use it for a sentence, right? أنا بريطاني لكنك سعودي, right? That's different. But there's a لكن which does عطف of مفردات, right? Here we're talking about doing a mufrad. عطف مفرد to a mufrad, right? So effectively, like salih wa talih, that's the same. So lakin is acting like is doing atf of mufrad to a mufrad, right? So talih, not so good, is doing atf to good, right? ما مررت بصالح لكن طالح, right? As opposed to saying something like, I didn't walk by somebody who was good, لكني فعلت كذا وكذا. That's something else. Here we're talking about عطف مفرد to a مفرد. طالح, bad, to صالح, good. Okay? Does everyone understand what I'm saying? So when I do
Yes,
mufrad,
Sheikh.
I talk about this noun to a noun. I'm not talking about a sentence, right? So when you do sentence to sentence, that's something else. Here we're using it as a harf atf of a mufrad to a mufrad, right? One noun to another noun. وبل الإضراب, to go back on something. نحو قام زيد بل عمرو, right? Zaid stood, comma, rather it was Amr that stood, right? ولا للنفي نحو جاء زيد لا عمرو, right? So la has many different roles, right? You can do nafi of a jumla, nafi of a sentence. It could do the amal of laysa. It could negate a verb, etc. But here it's doing atf, right? It's grammatically like wow, right? And so when you see, when you see, for example, wala, the la is not doing atf there, right? So if you saw wala, right, that means the wow is doing atf, the la is not doing atf, right? So the la can also become before a sifa. It can mean like the equivalent of un. هذا ولد لا جيد, right? It's like he's an ungood child, right? لا فارض ولا بكر, right? You could do like that. But here this is the la that is effective like doing wow. Like if I said جاء زيد وعمر, grammatically that's the same as جاء زيد لا عمر. But what does it mean? It comes after a positive sentence. So the wala that comes after a negative sentence, that is something else. That's la zaida. Okay? When I say, for example, لست بريطانيا ولا سويسريا, right? So that's called la zaida. That's a la that's added to make things really clear, but it's not necessary. Okay? But that's not what we're talking about. This is the la that's not preceded by a wow, right? So نحو جاء زيد لا عمر, right? So and so, not so and so, right? So it's grammatically like wow, but it has an opposite meaning. Okay? فإن عطفت بهذه الأحرف على مرفوع رفعته أو عطفت بها على منصوب نصبته إلى آخره أو على مجزوم جزمته, right? تقول قام زيد وعمر ورأيت زيد وعمر ومرت بزيد وعمر وتقول يقعد زيد ولن يقوم ويقعد زيد ولم يقم ويقعد زيد. So لم يقم ويقعد, right? Okay? Everyone's following? So I can do, so these are all examples of mufrads though. This is verb to verb, noun to noun. Okay, and I can do it with the sentence as well, right? If the sentence had a mahal, I could copy the mahal of that sentence onto another sentence. هذا رجل يجلس ويدعو. So yajlisu is a jumla that's describing the man, so it's rafa'. And then I copy that rafa' to the next sentence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Sheikh.
Yes.
Khair. And a badal can also be a verb. You can have we'll see that in a second, I think. Yeah. You might not have it here, but you can also have a badal could also be a verb. Right. Go ahead, Muhammad.
If we change the جملة, so it would be زيد لم يقم ويقعد. Would it be عطف of الفعل عن فعل أو جملة عن جملة؟
Yeah, it's a good question. So if I said زيد لم يقم ويقعد قطعا is an عطف جملة جملة. Right?
Yeah.
So that I'm saying Zaid did not stand and he sits, by the way. So that's just clearly عطف جملة to a jumla, right? But if I said زيد لم يقم ويقعد and it's majzoom, then it's عطف of it's kind of actually both at the same time. So you're actually combining sentence to sentence, which has no mahal, because Zaid. So when I said yeah, you can copy the sentence while copying the mufrad at the same time. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? Say things like jaa. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. There's other more complex things that we covered in the Alfiya. We won't go to that now. Okay. Okay. So it says والبدل وهو now we're going to the badal. وهو البدل وهو التابع المقصود. Right? المقصود بالنسبة. Right? It was the whole point. So if the second word is maqsood, it's a badal. If the first word is maqsood, then the second word is atf bayan. Okay. Now, because atf bayan is essentially like a nat, it will be described as a nat sometimes. You'll see that in the older books they call it nat. You say, how could that be a nat? It's not mushtaq, right? So it would be nice to say nat is of two categories, mushtaq and ghayr mushtaq, because in reality it's a similar kind of thing. Does that make sense? Like, say, imagine if in English you're saying there's two ways you could describe a word in English. You could use an adjective or you could use a noun, like a tablecloth, right? A football player, um, you know, and then a tall player, and a burnt cloth, right? So burnt, tall, these are adjectives, but then you could use nouns. So it's a bit like that. Wallahu a'lam. Okay, so he says والبدل هو التابع المقصور بالنسبة بغير واسطة. There's nothing in between. وهو أربعة أقسام بدل كل من كل نحو اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. What is that? صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم, right? Similarly, ومن يفعل ذلك يلقى أثاما. يلقى, so مجزوم. يلقى أثاما. يضاعف له العذاب يوم القيامة ويخلد فيه مهانا. So يضاعف is a badal of يلقى. Okay, whoever does that will meet a punishment. What do you mean? يضاعف له العذاب يوم القيامة. His punishment will be doubled on Judgment Day. ويخلد فيه مهانا, and he will remain there forever in an embarrassed and humbled state. Okay, so that's when you badal of a verb to another verb. Okay. نحو اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم وبدل بعض من كل نحو والله ولله على الناس حج البيت. In Hafs we recite it حج البيت, yeah, do we? ولله على حج البيت. How do you do it in Hafs? حج البيت or حج البيت? I can't remember. One of these problems is my relationship to the qira'at is like people who do comparative fiqh, right? When you study people who do comparative fiqh, they're like, Habibi, you don't know either, right? Like all you did at college was like, oh, you did comparative fiqh. We did all the madhabs, i.e. me, you know nothing. So if you do the qira'at, ladies and gentlemen, do them properly. Because otherwise, if you're just familiar with them, it's nice, but you make these mistakes. Like I can't remember now. Is it which one's Hafsa, which one's other qira'at? Hajj or Hijj?
I think it's Hijj al-Bayti.
Yeah. Anyway, the point is,
I'll check,
وعلى
but I think it's Hijj.
you can check inshallah. وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ النَّاسِ كُلُّهُم, right? حج البيت. And then it says, مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا, right? So man is a badal of nas, and it's badal ba'd min kull. It's not all of them. All people have to do hajj. I mean those who are able, right? So man is a badal ba'd min kull. Now, also, if we say hajj al-bayti as a masdar, right? And then man can become a fa'il, right? But that would mean that it's a fard kifaya for those who are able to go on hajj to go on hajj. Does that make sense? So if we say everybody has to go on hajj, comma, I mean those who are able to go, that's cool, that's a badal, okay? But if we say it is an obligation on all people, the going, the visiting of the sacred temple by those who are able to do it. So we make it a masdar, hajj as a masdar, al-bayti is the maf'ul bihi, and man is the fa'il of that masdar. Jazakum khair. Right? So if we say hajj then, hajjul bayti, that means as a masdar, okay, then man can be its fa'il, and that would make it fard kifaya for everybody who is able to go on hajj to go on hajj. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right? So that means if Muhammad is able to go on hajj and he doesn't, I'm sinful. But if we make it a badal, then it means those who have to go on hajj have to go on hajj. Khalas, that's it. It's not a fard kifaya that people who can go on hajj go on hajj. Is everybody following? I know Muhammad's following. Anybody else? Who else is here? Lanat, you're following?
Yes, I am, Sheikh. It's clear.
Okay, وَبَدَلُ اشْتِمَال. So this is like ba'd, but when the ba'd is ma'nawi, right? It's part of the concept of it. It's not a part of it. It's not something you can cut off. So the difference between badal ishtimal and badal ba'd min kull is that it's like discrete, like I akalt al khubza nisfahu, right? So you could actually cut the bread in half. I said the bread meaning half of it, the people meaning these group of among them, right? As opposed to badal ishtimal, which is not really a physical part of it, but it's a concept of it, right? بدل الاجتماع نحو يسألونك عن الشهر الحرام يعني يسألونك عن القتال فيه, right? So they're not asking you about the holy months in general, they're asking specifically about a certain aspect of it, right? ينفعني استفدت من زيد علمه, right? Like right? So his knowledge. So the concept of Zayd يشتمل على علمه. وبدل غلط, and this is kind of just pointless. These are kind of just extra things to do with like mistakes. نحو رأيت زيدا whoops الفرس, right? أردت أن تقول الفرس فغلطت فذكرت زيدا عوضا عن الفرس ثم أبدلت الفرس منه, which is kind of pointless. Okay, so now we're on to منصوبات 16. والمفعول به والمفعول مطلق والمفعول من أجله والمفعول فيه والمفعول معه وخبر كان, right? So generally speaking, what words are mansub are words that are to do with the verbs, right? In balagha we call these the muta'allaqat of the fi'l, right? The things to do with the fi'l, right? You could loosely translate them as adverbs, right? So imagine if in English we treated an object as if it was an adverb. In which case, in Arabic, all adverbs, everything that you use to add on and qualify the verb would be mansub. So the maf'ul bihi, the thing that the verb happened to. Wal maf'ul mutlaq, the action itself. Al maf'ul min ajlihi, the cause of the action. Al maf'ul fihi, the place or time of the action. Al maf'ul ma'ahu, the thing with which the action was done. Right? So these are all these mafa'il, all of these things that are kind of like the adverbs or the add-on verb. These are all um, um, what was it? What was I going to say? Yeah, these are all mansub. Okay. And then there's a bunch of other things like khabaru kana. So, but again, if you think of kana is a bit like a verb, right? And then hal is a bit like, again, an adverb. But tamyiz, a bit like an adverb. Mustathna is also a bit like a object of a verb, right? And then ismullah, that's slightly different. There's kind of a bit of anomaly there. Munada is also kind of mudaf, is actually essentially a maf'ul bihi, right? Like ad'u Zaydan, right? And then there's a bunch of other things as well. Okay, so he says والمفعول به, and he mentions a list. He says الأول المفعول به وهو الاسم الذي وقع عليه فعل الفاعل حقيقة كأنزل الله الغيث أو مجازا كأنبت الربيع البقلة. Okay, so it could be metaphorically, like the rain caused the grass to grow, right? It's not literally the case, but it's like linguistically literally, right? So it's kind of like we're not looking at the haqiqa in terms of haqiqa. We're looking at like, yeah, I mean, approximately. Right? We have an issue then with verbs like banaytu dara and khalaqa Allahu samawati wal ard, right? And this can get quite deep if you think about it, right? So khalaqa samawati wal ard. If the heavens and the earth did not exist, how did Allah create them? Right? Like if you can imagine you have a creative power, okay? And you have this app that creates things. If you can't select something to create, then how do you do it? Like, what did he click on? So metaphorically, right? Like metaphorically, what did Allah click on to say, click, I'll create that. So if there was no thing, then how did waqa alayhi al-fi'l? How did the action happen to it? Does that make sense? So then you're going to go and say, well, it existed in the realm of, in the realm of potential. So you say, well, so Allah didn't create the realm of potential. You know what I'm saying? It gets problematic. So these are actually masail falsafiyya and masail aqadiyya in reality, right? I don't really choose to engage myself in these kind of discussions, but it is, if you wanted to, you can get into it, right? So did Allah create the potential of things? Like, was there always, did Allah create imkan? You say, well, they were just in the world of imkan. Did Allah create imkan? Right? The concept of possibility. Did Allah create that, or was that always there? Right? And so, the philosopher and the mutakallimin, they have answers to these things, right? But one answer is you can say that the khalaqa samawati wal ard, that al-samawati wal ard is not actually a maf'ul bihi. The khalaqa samawati wal ard is actually a maf'ul mutlaq. Okay, so what's the difference between a maf'ul bihi and a maf'ul mutlaq? Okay, well, let's look at the word الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات. Are the salihat the things that the people did? You say yes. Can you separate your action from the thing that you did? Like, is your action anything other than the thing that you did? So in which case, we can look at وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ as things that the وَقَعَ عَلَيْهِ الْفِعْلِ, the action of did happened to the good deeds. Or were the good deeds the thing that they did? So we can analyze salihat as a maf'ul bihi or as a maf'ul mutlaq. They are the actions themselves. They did well. They acted righteously. Can you see that difference? So I acted righteously. That's what I did. I did good deeds. That's what my doing happened to. Does that make sense?
So it becomes عملوا أعمالا صالحات, something like
Yeah,
that.
so عملوا أعمالا صالحات, that's now the maf'ul bihi. Or do you mean that is just, does it mean, do you mean that the وعمل صالحا, عمل صالحا, is that just عمل عملا صالحا, right? So that means like, that's like saying mashallah شربت شربا شربت شربا قويا, right? Or شربت شربا كثيرا. So شربت كثيرا, do you mean you drank a lot of stuff, or did you just drink a lot, meaning you did a lot of actions of drinking? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Lanat, make sense?
Yes, Sheikh.
Right? So now when you apply that to created the heavens and the earth, if we make خلق السماوات والأرض, if we make the heavens and the earth his action, as opposed to the option, the object of his action, right? Then السماوات والأرض become a مفعول مطلق and not a مفعول به. Okay? Right? بنيت الدار is بنيت بناء كان مظهره أو نتيجته الدار. Right? I built the house, meaning I did an activity whose resultant effect was a house. Does that make sense? Because otherwise you can't build the house because there's no house to build. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So now
Yes.
now we ask the mutakallimin. So are you trying to say then the creation of heavens and earth is that his fi'l? Is that his qudra? Or is that a muta'allaq of his qudra? Because if you say the heavens and the earth are his qudra, then you're a mulhid. Because you're saying that Allah, that's like the heavens and the earth are Allah's omnipotent power. Then you're saying Allah has a part of Allah increased somehow in something. Does that make sense? That means like if it's his action and his action is his sifa, then how does that work? Right? So you can see there's a lot of theological discussions here. Right? So the gap between the muta'allaq of his qudra and the qudra itself, right? And how that all works out is problematic, right? And part of that is lugha. So we have to understand that, I remember, may Allah, inshallah, he's still alive, Dr. Muhammad Ismail Awad. He was the former, I believe, former head of Arabic department in University of Jordan. And he's just saying, like, you can't separate Nahu and Kalam. They're not separable because it's actually one discussion, right? Like, mutakallimin are talking while the Nahwiyin are talking, and it's actually one discussion. You can't separate Kalam from falsafa, even if you wanted to. Like someone like myself, I don't care about falsafa. I'm not interested in mantiq, but you can't actually separate it, right? Just like you can't separate psychology from sociology. It's not actually possible. And sociology from history. Like you say, I don't care about history, but I'm into psychology. Well, if you're into psychology, you're into sociology. If you're into sociology, you're talking about history. You can't actually separate the two, right? So whether you want to or not, like myself, I don't care about logic. I don't care about falsafa. I'm not interested. But in reality, every single time you think, you are using a form of logic, and you are using certain assumptions, and you're using a certain falsafa, right? So these are all. So you cannot talk about Arabic grammar without talking about falsafa accidentally. And if you're talking about falsafa, you're either making sense or not. Does that make sense? Like, so that's why we look at the late scholars. All of these discussions are going to be one, right? Look at the Muhashin on this thing. It's one discussion. They're all there. Like Khudari, people like that. Hashid Khudari on Ibn. This whole discussion is one. It is one discussion with falsafa, with mantiq, with kalam, and nahu, and balagha, all in one. You can't separate these five things. Are you following?
Yes.
Right. So that's why you look basically over the last 500 years, everybody, that's their toolkit. All the muhashin, everybody, whether they like it or not, they don't have a choice. Okay, ويصح نفيه عنه, right? You could say it did or it didn't do something. وهو على قسمين ظاهر ومضمر. It could be a normal noun or pronoun. فالظاهر نحو ضربت زيدا وما ضربت زيدا. والمضمر قسمان متصل ومنفصل. فالمتصل ما لا يتقدم على عامله ولا يلي إلا في الاختيار, right? والمنفصل بخلافه. وكل منهما 12. المتصل أكرمني وأكرمنا وأكرمك وأكرمك وأكرمكما إلى آخره. والمنفصل إياي أكرم وإيانا أكرم وإياك أكرم وإياك أكرم إلى آخره. Right? And so here the إياي, so it says فالمتصل ما لا يتقدم على عامله ولا يلي إلا في الاختيار. Right? So you don't use the word illa, right? You don't say illa, you don't say, for example, you say things like so you can't say things like illa ka, right? You can't say ma darabtu illa ka. You can't say that, right? You say ma darabtu illa iyaka, right? And you can't say things like right, ma la yataqaddamu ala ami. It doesn't come before its verb. So the iyaka could come before the verb, right? And it doesn't follow illa fil ikhtiyar normally. Now in shi'r you can do that. Lawlaka, right? Lawlaka. Ma ra'aytu illaka. You can do that in poetry, but you can't do that normally. Okay. Even lawlaha, right? It means lawla he, not lawlaha. Okay, and then it goes on to the next thing. Okay, with the maf'ul bihi as well, there's another discussion here is connecting both, so the maf'ul bihi and muttasil, right? Whether it's connected or not. There's another discussion is what about with kuntu, right? And wajadtu and kana, right? So usually we say things like this: فَسَيَكْفِي كَهُمْ, right? Allah will suffice you them. And you connect both pronouns. فَسَيَكْفِي كَهُمْ. Both maf'ul bihis are connected. Okay? So that's damir, there's a maf'ul bihi as a damir muttasil, right? And that's how it is. كَسَوْتُكَهُ, right? I dressed you in it. كَسَوْتُكَهُ, right? That's fine. Now, if then it's in dhanna, okay, or it's in kana, you separate them. But ideally, so you say dhanantuka iyahu, I thought you were he, right? Kuntu iyahu, I was he, right? You could say kuntuhu, I was he. You could say that it exists, but it's not the best, not the afsah, right? So dhanantukahu, right? Dhanantuka iyahu. Okay, so if it's in min bab, so but with a'taytukahu, I could split it. So in ammiya, right? A'tani iyah, right? That's not the best thing to say. The best thing to say is a'tanihi, right? A'tanihi. He gave it to me. A'tanihi, right? But you could say a'tani iyah. You could say that as well, right? But with dhanna and wajada and kana, it's better to separate them, right? Kuntu iyah, and you can say kuntu iyah, and what else? And dhanantukahu, but it's better to say dhanantuka iyahu. I thought you were he. Right? Does that make sense?
With which verbs? Which
So
verbs, Sheikh?
with verbs, with the verbs that are originally mubtada and khabar. So dhanna is originally mubtada and khabar relationship.
Ah,
Kana is originally mubtada and khabar relationship, right? So if it's
yeah.
originally a mubtada khabar relationship, it's better to separate them, but you can join them. But with the two maf'ul bihis are really two maf'ul bihis like kasa, a'ta, etc. Then it's better to keep them together, but you can separate them if you want. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. So
Yes, Sheikh.
it's better to say dhanantuka iyyahu than dhanantukahu, but you can. And it's better to say a'taytukahu than to say a'taytuka iyyah, but you can say a'taytuka iyyah. Okay. So then we're going to go on to maf'ul mutlaq, inshallah. We'll come to that, inshallah, next week. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.